thought she had already won. That's what I kept thinking as I stood on the front porch of the house my son had paid for with 12 years of his life. The house I had helped him pick out. The house I had painted the nursery in. The house where I had watched my grandson take his first steps, and listened to her tell me I had 1 hour to collect my things and leave. My son Marcus had been dead for 4 days. I want to be clear about something. I am 63 years old. I have buried a wife. I buried my parents. I have been through hard things, but nothing, not one moment in my life, had prepared me for standing in that driveway while my daughter-in-law pointed at her watch and told me the clock was running. Her name was Serena. She had been married to my son for 9 years. I had done everything a father-in-law is supposed to do. I welcomed her at holidays. I babysat when she needed a night out. I lent them money without asking for it back when Marcus was between jobs. I thought we had an understanding, the way families do. Not perfect, but solid. I was wrong about that. Marcus died on a Tuesday, a cardiac event, the doctors called it. He was 41 years old and he ran 5 miles every other morning, and he ate the kind of food his wife put in front of him, which was mostly salads and things with quinoa that I had no use for. There was no warning. He went to work, felt strange at his desk around 2 in the afternoon, and by the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. I drove 4 hours to get to that hospital. I sat with Serena in the waiting room. I held her hand. I cried with her. I thought we were grieving together. The funeral was that Saturday. My grandson, I'll call him Benji, he was 9 years old, sat between his mother and me in the front pew, and at some point during the service he reached over and took my hand without saying anything. He just held it. I couldn't look at him because I knew if I did, I would completely fall apart, so I stared straight ahead at the photograph of my son on the easel, and I held that little hand back as tightly as I dared. After the service, at the reception at their house, I noticed a man I didn't recognize. He was maybe 45, well-dressed, hair going silver at the temples. He wasn't from Marcus's side. He wasn't a coworker. I'd met most of those. He stood near the kitchen, and every so often I would catch Serena glancing at him from across the room. Not the way you glance at a guest you're checking on. A different kind of glance. I told myself I was imagining things. My son had been dead for 6 days. I was not at my best. I stayed at the house that week because Benji needed someone, and Serena had asked me to. That was what I believed. On Thursday morning, she came downstairs, poured herself a cup of coffee, sat across from me at the kitchen table, and told me she needed me to be out by Friday afternoon. I said, "I'm sorry?" She said she was planning to make some changes and she needed space to do that. She said it the way you'd say it to a contractor. Polite, firm, final. I said, "Serena, your husband, my son has been gone for 10 days. She said she understood that, and she was sorry, but she needed me to respect her wishes in her home. Her home. That was the word she used. I noticed it. I packed what I had brought with me. I kissed Benji goodbye. He didn't fully understand what was happening, just that Grandpa was leaving, and I drove 2 hours to a motel off the highway because I couldn't face driving all the way back to my place that night. I lay on that motel bed and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about the man at the reception. I thought about the word her home. I thought about how quickly she had pivoted from grief to logistics. And then I started thinking about the safe. Marcus had called me about 6 months before he died. He'd called late after 9, which was unusual for him. He said he wanted to tell me something and he needed me to keep it between us. He said he'd had some concerns about his marriage for a while. That things weren't what he'd thought they were. He said he'd been to see an attorney, not to file anything, just to understand his options. And he said he'd made a new will. He told me where he'd kept a copy, in a fireproof box in the back of his workshop behind the cabinet with the power tools. He said the combination was the year his mother and I got married, followed by the year he was born. He said he hoped I'd never need to know this, but he wanted me to know. I had not thought about that conversation in months. I got up off that motel bed at 11:30 at night and I drove back. The workshop was detached from the house around back, and Marcus had always kept a spare key on a hook inside the garage. Serena hadn't thought to change that lock yet. I went in, found the hook, found the key. I found the hook, found the key. I found the fireproof box exactly where Marcus had said it would be. The combination worked on the first try. Inside was a document from an attorney's office in Dayton, dated 8 months ago, and a sealed envelope with my name written on the front in my son's handwriting. I sat on the floor of that workshop in the dark with a flashlight, and I read both of them. I will not say everything that was in the letter. Some of it was private in a way that I want to keep between my son and me. But I will say this, Marcus had known. He had suspected for over a year that Serena was involved with someone else. He had hired a private investigator. He had documentation. He had taken steps. The will was something. He had left the house to Benji in trust, managed by an independent trustee, not Serena, until Benji turned 25. He had left his investment accounts and his life insurance to a trust for Benji's education. He had left Serena a fair but specific sum and nothing more. He had left me his grandfather's watch and his record collection and a letter, and he had named me as a secondary trustee alongside the attorney for Benji's trust. I sat there on the concrete floor of that workshop and I cried, not because of the money, because my son had known his marriage was falling apart and he had said nothing to me except that one late night phone call, and he had spent his last months quietly making sure his boy would be taken care of, and he had died before any of it became necessary, and he never got to fix it. I stayed until 3 a.m, put everything back, relocked the box, replaced the key. Then I drove home. The will reading was scheduled for the following Thursday at the office of an attorney named Collins. Serena had arranged it through her own lawyer. I called Marcus's attorney, a man named Eugene Farrell, first thing the next morning. I told him I was Marcus's father, and that I believed I was named in his estate documents. He confirmed it. He said he had already reached out to Serena's attorney, and that there was going to be a meeting. There was a meeting, all right. I arrived at Collins's office at 1 o'clock. Serena was already there with her lawyer, and with the man from the reception. She introduced him to someone in the hallway as a friend who was supporting her during a difficult time. She did not introduce him to me. Eugene Farrell arrived a few minutes later. He was a small man, mid-50s, with the quiet, organized manner of someone who has sat in a lot of rooms like this one, and is never surprised by what happens in them. When everyone was seated, Serena's attorney began with some pleasantries about the process, about the importance of clarity during a difficult time for the family. Serena looked at me from across the table. She had a small, composed smile. She said, "I just want to make sure we're all aligned on what Marcus would have wanted." Eugene Farrell set a folder on the table and opened it. He said, "I believe we can address that directly. Marcus Hensley executed a revised will in my office 8 months ago. I'm going to walk everyone through it now." Serena's attorney said, "We were not made aware of a revised document." Eugene said, "No, you wouldn't have been." The smile on Serena's face did not change right away. It took about 4 minutes. That was how long it took Eugene Farrell to read through the key provisions, the trust for Benji, the trustee arrangements, the specific bequeathals, the limited distribution to the surviving spouse. By the time he got to the part about her settlement amount, the smile was gone. Her attorney asked to pause the meeting. There was a discussion in the hallway. I stayed in my seat and looked at my hands. When they came back, Serena's attorney said there might be grounds to contest the document. Eugene Farrell said that was absolutely her client's right, and that he looked forward to the process, and that in the meantime the document stood as written. The man who had been supporting her during a difficult time stood up and left the room without saying anything. I watched him go. Serena looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since we'd sat down. She said, "You did this." I said, "My son did this 8 months ago, when he was alive and of sound mind and had his reasons." She said something else after that. I'm not going to repeat it. I went home and I waited. What came out over the following weeks was not pleasant, but it was not surprising. The private investigator Marcus had hired had documented more than I knew. Serena and the man from the reception, his name was not important, but he was a real estate developer from Columbus, had been involved for nearly 2 years. There were financial records that Serena's attorney eventually had to acknowledge. There were transfers. There was a joint account I had not known about. When Serena's attorney received the full documentation packet from Eugene Farrell, the contest of the will quietly went away. She took the settlement Marcus had left her. She vacated the house, which went into the trust for Benji. The trustee, Eugene Farrell's firm, arranged for the property to be managed appropriately. Benji went to live with Serena's parents temporarily while things were sorted. That part was hard. I will not pretend otherwise. Benji called me from his grandmother's house on a Sunday afternoon about 6 weeks after all of this. He said, "Grandpa, Mom said you took Dad's stuff." He said it the way a 9-year-old says things, not accusatory, just confused. I said, "I didn't take anything, buddy. Your dad made some decisions before he died. Decisions about how to take care of you, that's all." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Is Dad's record player still somewhere?" I said yes. It was in my house. I'd brought it back when I collected the bequeathed items. He said, "Can I hear it sometime?" I said absolutely, anytime he wanted. That phone call mattered more to me than anything that happened in any attorney's office. I want to be honest about that. The legal process took nearly 8 months from start to finish. Serena's initial contest of the will, the discovery process, the eventual settlement of that contest, it moved slowly, the way these things do. Eugene Farrell built his hours, and the estate covered it, which was what Marcus had planned for. I had my own attorney review everything, just to be certain I understood my role as secondary trustee. In the end, Benji's trust was intact. His education fund was intact. The house was in the trust. Serena had moved to an apartment in Columbus closer to her friend the developer, as far as I could tell. I don't wish her suffering. I want to be honest about that too. She made choices that hurt a lot of people, including a child who never asked to be in the middle of any of it. But I'm 63 years old, and I've learned that wishing suffering on people is a weight you carry yourself, and I have enough to carry. What I think about when I think about all of this is that phone call. Marcus calling me after 9 on a Tuesday night, his voice careful and controlled the way it got when he was trying not to show that something was bothering him. Him saying, "I hope you never need to know this." Him saying, "But I want you to know this." Him saying, "But I want you to know." He had done everything quietly. No drama, no confrontation, just a man who saw what was coming and made sure his boy was protected. That was my son. That is the thing I want people to understand about him, if they understand nothing else. I see Benji every other weekend now. We have a system, his maternal grandparents are good people, and we have worked something out that puts the boy first. He is 10 now. He has his father's eyes and his father's way of going quiet when he's thinking hard about something. He likes baseball and he likes those old records. And sometimes when we're in my living room with the turntable going, I'll look over and he'll have his head tilted slightly to one side the exact same way his father used to, and I have to find something to do with my hands for a minute. It's not a happy ending. I don't think that's the right word for it. My son is gone, and that fact does not change. Benji is growing up without his father, and that is a loss that no trust fund and no legal victory and no amount of justice served in a conference room is going to fix. But the morning my son made that phone call, the night he sat in some quiet room in his house, after his wife had gone to sleep and picked up the phone and called his father, he gave me something. He gave me a chance to finish what he started, to make sure that little boy was not left with nothing. I drove home from Eugene Farrell's office on a Thursday afternoon in October, and I stopped at the cemetery on the way. I sat by the stone for a while. I didn't say much. There wasn't much that needed saying. I told him I'd found it. I told him it worked. Then I drove home, put the turntable on, and let the record play all the way through to the end. I keep coming back to the workshop, that concrete floor, the flashlight, the combination lock clicking open on the first try. Marcus didn't leave me a fortune. He left me a flashlight moment, the kind where everything you thought you understood about a person becomes clearer and more painful at the same time. He had known. He had planned. He had stayed quiet about it the way he stayed quiet about most hard things, and he had done the right thing anyway, without anyone watching, without any applause, without even the certainty that it would matter. That's the thing about doing it right when no one is looking. It doesn't feel like a virtue in the moment. It feels like sitting alone in a dark room, making a decision that might never matter. Marcus made that decision. He drove to Eugene Farrell's office. He signed the papers. He called me after 9 on a Tuesday night and told me where to look. And then he went back to his life. And 6 months later, his life was over. And the decision he made in that quiet room is the reason his son will go to college, will have a home, will have something solid to stand on when he's grown. I think about Serena, too. Not with bitterness. I mean that. I think about what it costs a person to live the way she lived, to build a marriage on calculation. To sit at a funeral and glance across the room at the man you've already decided to replace your husband with. That is not a life that pays off. Not because the universe is keeping score in some mystical way, but because the choices we make shape the person we become, and the person she became walked out of that conference room with a settlement check and nothing else. No child, no community, no one who knew her and still trusted her. That is its own kind of poverty, and she built it herself, one small decision at a time. I am not wise. I want to say that plainly. I'm a 63-year-old man who spent a night on a motel mattress staring at the ceiling and another night on a concrete floor reading his dead son's handwriting by flashlight. I did not handle everything gracefully. There were weeks I was not good company for anyone. There were mornings I sat in my kitchen with cold coffee and could not identify a single reason to get up. What got me up was not courage, in any heroic sense. It was something smaller and more stubborn than that. The understanding that Benji was going to call again on some Sunday afternoon, and when he did, I needed to be the person who answered. That is not a grand philosophy. It is just a man deciding, one day at a time, to still be there. I think that is what Marcus was doing too in those last months. Not being heroic, just being careful. Just being the kind of person who thinks past his own pain to what the people he loves will need later. That takes something, a kind of quiet toughness that doesn't announce itself, that doesn't need anyone to see it. He had it. I didn't always recognize it when he was alive. I recognize it now. Benji has it too. I can already see it in him. The way he goes still when something is hard. The way he tilts his head and works through a thing before he speaks. He is 10 years old, and he has already lost more than most adults I know, and he is still curious, still gentle, still reaching for the record player and asking what song this is. I'll take that. I'll take every Sunday phone call and every afternoon with the turntable going and every moment that boy tilts his head exactly like his father used to. That's what Marcus left me. Not the watch, not the records. That